Hey everyone, I'm Alex.
And I'm Jack.
And today we'll be ranking the bosses of Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story from worst to best. Commonly regarded as the best in the series, Inside Story was an essential game for any DSi owner, and my younger self was no exception. It was a favorite of mine growing up, so of course I wanted to cover it with Jack at some point. Unfortunately, the only way we could record the gameplay was with an emulator port of the 3DS remake, which resulted in me having to play all the giant battles sideways and suffering atrocious lag during fights.
As is often the case with replaying lengthy RPGs, we were bored out of our minds for the majority of our respective runs, and we both found this video a slog to make. That being said, Inside Story was tenfold better than either of its predecessors, and the leaps in gameplay evolution not only made the game stand out, but feel much more engaging and vibrant as well. It's worth mentioning we're not counting any X bosses on this list, as there's no discerning factors, looks aside, and Bowser X specifically only gains a single new attack over the mid-game boss variant. As tedious as certain aspects of this game are, Bowser's Inside Story is the best in the 5-man roster of Mario and Luigi titles, and the remake only solidifies that claim. Let's get into the ranking.
The Tower of Yik, which sounds like a noise I would make while choking, is somehow even less fun than a fatally clogged esophagus. My fight lasted a whopping 45 minutes, because Bowser's punches are about as effective at keeping him in the water as spitballs. The rage I felt upon seeing him fly out of the water and back to the middle of the arena was so violent I can scarcely put it into words. The despair of watching my progress get endlessly reset began to really kick in around the 30-minute mark, by which my eyes were already glazed over and my mouth was already frothing like a rabid dog. Any fight that has the potential to take 45 minutes to beat is already a Guinness World Records nominee for being some stupid shit. But the fine details here are just as ugly. If you happen to not notice the minuscule Monty moles patching up the tower and then flame them off, they heal his health by about a third, undoing at least 5 minutes of progress in the process. As Fawful would say, I have fury.
To summarize our mutual thoughts on Giant Bowser as a whole, he is f***ing miserable. You'd figure because it's the first there wouldn't be monotony to Bowser's Castle, but it's fair to say that within 4 to 5 minutes most of us were punching ourselves in the dick for pleasure. First of all, this is a really f***ing stupid idea, and the worst part is that all the Giant Bowser fights are about as lore important as a boss fight can get, signifying that maybe there was some lazy writing along the way, although it's just a hunch. If you actually somehow disagree with our take on Giant Bowser, feel free to stuff your head in a urinal. F*** you.
Do you like tutorial bosses? Yeah, me neither, but this one is nowhere near as evil as the ones from Partners in Time. Still, this is pretty boring, and it's embarrassing that there are 2 bosses below this scripted walk in the park.
Midbus? I don't know. He benefits from being Bowser's tutorial, so he's multiple times more fun than the other. I love this Palpatine-esque quip he drops at the end of the fight.
The biggest common denominator among my least favorite bosses is excessive length. It's hard to make an RPG boss engaging for a really long time, so the biggest offenders are always the ones who refuse to show themselves out and hold on to your time with a vice grip. The Alpha Cretin clearly didn't get the memo, because it demands a minimum of 2 repetitious, drawn-out cycles of dissolving the bonds with both bros and beating on the real one hiding in a crowd of clones. There are a whopping 2 attacks, none of which can be countered, and both of which take an agonizingly long time to wrap up. I could sit through that entire Bowser Tea Time segment in the time it takes for that electric line move to run its full course. This fight is a through and through snooze fest, with no redeemable factors to save face in the slightest.
Props to Scutlet for having a noticeably unique attack, otherwise I'm like 85 to 90% sure there was a Trash Pack Trashy exactly like this, and I think this is the bleakest boss in the entire series.
It seems that along with kidnapping and attempted murder, we can finally add animal abuse to the long list of crimes to Bowser's name. I don't really blame him though. I've dealt with some really annoying dogs before that I've been tempted to punt like a football. Not sure I'd go as far as to burn them alive, but hey, different strokes for different folks. Broggy isn't a particularly gripping fight, but considering he's just a tutorial for combat use of flame breath, he's surprisingly pleasant. And while I'm on the topic, neither of us count Brock Monsieur as a boss. It's sort of an arbitrary distinction since he's a tutorial fight like Bragi, but he doesn't feel really combat-y. If you're dying to know for whatever reason, we'd probably have him at like 17th or something. Next.
By this point, it's fair to say there's a collective species of sentient worm beings in the Mario and Luigi cinematic universe like apes and baboons are in real life. With that said, the obvious connection between Swiggler from Partners in Time and Dermite is both apparent and laudable, although beyond that, while there is attack variation, it's extremely primitive and green shell spam all but murks this early game lackey.
Fawful Express not at the bottom? That's how you know we're talking about the remake, because not even the foul, stinking scrap heap that is the Tower of Yik can hold a torch to the DSi version of the Fawful Express, where fire was done by blowing into the mic. You could have Michael Phelps heaving into that thing and it would think he was a chain smoker. I'd be 10 minutes into this fight feeling like I just escaped that opening trap from Saw 6. Fortunately, the remake spares you the agony of having to forcefully collapse your own lungs, and just maps it to a button press or in my case a mouse click. I personally was able to have an alright time with that hurdle removed, since I thought it was otherwise a dynamic fight with lots of changes as it goes and some creative attacks that were fairly fun to counter. That Monty Mole bomb when it whips out near the end is especially satisfying, and I ranked it a bit higher for that alone. Jack still can't stand this thing, hence its low placement in our combined ranking, but I'll vouch for the remake being a significant step up over the original.
The Shroobs are completely unnecessary, and I didn't even know they existed until Alex texted me asking if I counted them as a boss. Mario and Luigi bosses almost universally feel half-assed, and this is no different, although the Shroobs benefit from both fan service and not being obligatory.
The obligatory Wiggler boss had to come in somewhere down the line. Combat with Bowser is, for the most part, miles more fun than the Mario and Luigi segments, but not even he is immune to the annoyance of the punch all the segments gimmick that pervades most Wiggler fights. You can mitigate it slightly by countering certain attacks like the circle walk or dropping vegetables on him, but it is undeniably a bit of a pain to do over and over. Also, having to beat up the fly guys as Mario and Luigi every time you want to drop crap on Wiggler kills the pacing and draws out a bit longer than necessary. I think this fight is decent, but there's still plenty of room for improvement.
I think Stone Blooper would have been in the top 5 had he not been the first Bowser boss. The best comparison would be the Flexow Sentry, who also have genius mechanical design but were unfortunately shoved in as early game lore filler in No Man's Wharf. While we both typically find the transition from Bowser to Mario and Luigi combat at best tedious and at worst downright frustrating, this fight keeps both sides of the coin fairly interactive. As well, in the Bowser phase, the bullets are really hard to counter, which I appreciate as early game challenges sorely lacking in most Mario games in general. The C-Pipe statue is actually not bad, a surefire feat relative to other mid-list bosses in Superstar Saga and Partners in Time.
The giant battles are, for the most part, nuisances down the line, but this one was by far the least irritating of the bunch. Along with the coolest appearance, it's also got some unique mechanics, like the black holes and the Boo Field charge attack, which I was a fan of. The black holes are functionally similar to the lake from the Tower of Yik fight, except landing the castle in one is guaranteed solid damage, and it never heals back your progress constantly. I actually had to do this fight twice because I died to Dark Fawful and forgot to save beforehand, so it's a testament to how not horrible Super Peach's castle is that I could stomach fighting it twice in a row.
If not already obvious, the bosses of Inside Story are substantially better as a whole compared to those of its prequels. In this game especially, Bowser's progression is great, climaxing with actually fighting him. I think it was neat being on the receiving end of special attacks you'd likely come to master by that point, not to mention it's an actual Bowser fight that's either 1, not a joke, 2, not an introduction, and 3, not a trans-species variant. Bowser was a necessary refresher on Mario and Luigi combat that stands out as a legitimate back and forth fight.
This was actually my favorite fight as a kid. I mentioned it a few weeks ago back in my video on No More Heroes, but I really liked the setup for this fight where Bowser is sent flying into Fawful's late night show and has to win a cage match. That looked especially good in the remaster, with Fawful's opening light show having got a major upgrade. Getting to square off against Midbis after he kicked your shit in the tutorial was satisfying, and made that attack where you punch him in the gut over and over great to block. That chain swinging move he has is also cool. I noticed I really like when the Bowser bosses have you make use of both the duck and punch to avoid the same move. Midbis can also heal by inhaling food the audience sends on stage should that happen, although it didn't occur ever in my fight here. It's not very complicated and the move pool was smaller than I remembered, but it's still a climactic confrontation that I think of as capping off the first act of the game on Bowser's end.
I think Dark Fawful should have been much better than he is. As already mentioned multiple times throughout this video, the arguably oversaturated vacuum mechanic makes yet another appearance in the penultimate boss of the game, and go figure, it completely kills any momentum built up. Also, this is Fawful's last appearance, so it's actually a bittersweet moment considering he's a ridiculously successful non-Koopaling villain, quite the achievement in the Mario world, not to mention just a perfect subordinate type character that was excellent throughout all his appearances. Personally, the original version of this fight is much better, generic boss theme aside, because Fury Mode makes this fight far longer than intended. And because of that, for poor souls like me who didn't unlock Broggy Bonker, this fight grows both exponentially more difficult and boring. While his overall moveset is very fun due to its simplicity and efficiency, the extensively long encounter makes it grow tedious after only a short while.
The final stand of Midbis is by far his most interesting incarnation, with this one having a unique ice theme to it. The snowball attack is a fun one, especially once you master the tricks it starts throwing at you later, like hiding the bomb and spinning incredibly quickly. The snowball chucking move is also interesting. It took me a while to decipher the tell for when he's going to throw one at you versus miss. I really like the Bowser portion of the fight, but sadly, in a similar vein to Wiggler, your progression is halted by having to use the bros to beat up some snowmen to clog his crown. I could have given it a pass if it was only one cycle, but for some reason the magic number is 8 snowmen, demanding 2 full rotations to even get to the fight proper. Blizzard Midbis is plenty of fun with this out of the way, and I still think highly of him, but that issue held him back from potentially placing in my top 3.
In all honesty, this is one of the strongest top 5s of any game I've played with respect to the game itself, and in specific numbers 5 to 3 are virtually impossible to rank with finality. There's a lot going on in favor of Bowser Memory MNL, but their biggest pitfall is a lack of HP that is somewhat fixed with the X variant, but that's more of a consolation than a point in favor. Their moveset is surprisingly light, and I still have no idea how Memory L's Boo attack works. I tend to just tank damage and pop an Ultra Nut after, and the Rainbow Star is one of the more satisfying attacks to no damage in the game. As well, because it is a gank, you can approach the fight either by taking down Mario or Luigi first, with my personal tactic being to knock out the latter to prevent him from being able to revive Memory M. With so little on paper, the amount of depth to Bowser Memory ML is truly indicative of their quality.
While Junker is technically trash, his fight is anything but. There is incredible variety in his attacks alone, but I also really appreciated that they went through the effort to make so many possible enemies that emerge from his broken Junker cans. I don't know just how many variations there are, but I've encountered at least 4 or 5. The Thwomp attack is a really inventive way to use jumping, and while not particularly hard to evade, it's still rather tense. Junker has well-balanced stats as well, so it doesn't feel overly long or short, which is much more difficult to pull off than it sounds. Junker is a rare instance where I'm actually glad Nintendo decided to make a random throwaway boss.
What Nintendo RPG bosses lack in mechanical challenge, they make up for in unique designs that flip the script on your average encounter found throughout the majority of the game. In this case, Wisdom is more like 2 fights packed into one, with a damage sponge and generally easy Dermite and 5th dimensional power scaled Wisdom. The main difference between the two, outside of color, size, and whatnot, is that Wisdom has a magical rod that prevents her from taking any serious damage, but can be easily taken out with a few bros attacks. Her moveset gets arguably repetitive, although considering both her and Dermite have a combined attack pool, it covers that fault. Personally, I think Wisdom is far and away the weakest of the top 5, although as the only Star Sage you actually fight, she serves her purpose as both a plot device and great boss nonetheless.
After tracking the Dark Star all around the airway as it munched on Bowser's DNA, I was certainly expecting a big fight, and it hit the mark for sure, even more so in the remake. In the original, this fight had the rather cheerful default boss music, which was kinda lame, but in this version there's a new, much darker theme that adds a lot to the atmosphere. The fight also has a very unique gimmick where you have to disable its invulnerability by hammering some of his little explosive goons into him, which is strangely satisfying. The Dark Star's attacks are all pretty iconic, ranging from the invisibility one that King Boo would go on to rip off in Paper Jam, to the Shadow Bros one that is extremely hard to dodge with emulator lag. Music, story significance, fun attacks, and creativity all converge here for a very impactful fight to kick off the home stretch of the game.
In a shocking precedent, the final boss of a Nintendo game wins out as the best said game has. I think it goes without saying at this point that Alpha Dream has a knack for closing the game with their highest work, making it 3 for 3 so far in Mario and Luigi. Out of those three, Dark Bowser and the Dark Star Core are the best for sure, as it separates itself from the somewhat monotonous limb-by-limb mechanic that Cackletta and the Elder Princess troops share. Not to say it isn't still present, it is, but at a much lighter scale than those mentioned. Dark Bowser himself is fairly easy, although memorizing each enemy's moveset through trial and error is just another tick in this fight's favor and legitimizes what would otherwise be little more than a road bump. In keeping up with the grandiose of what any given final boss should have, the Dark Star Core has the largest attack pool in the game, be it floating up to the top of the screen so as to avoid a one-shot laser, or even simply hammering slow-moving balls of electricity. In tandem with the incredible theme and graphics, it all blends together as one of, if not the best boss in the entirety of the Mario & Luigi series, fitting for an all-time classic RPG.
Thanks for watching, and we hope you enjoyed. We're going to take a little break from covering this series since it's really exhausting playing them all in a big marathon, so don't expect the Dream Team boss ranking video to come out anytime soon. As always, stay tuned for next week's upload if you enjoyed this video. Deuces.